Good morning, everyone. Today we're checking out a brand new video from Popcross Studios, Trismegistus Academy, Episode 7. And, I'll just go ahead and let him talk for himself.
I'm pushing my luck legally speaking with these designs. See, I've really wanted to add some Pokemon-inspired designs to my ongoing series, the Trismegistus Academy, about students at competing superhero schools scheming to take down the evil headmistresses. But because I plan on turning this series into a book when it's finished, I can't exactly just throw in some of my Pokemon as SCPs, or Pokemon as dragons, or designs that are very blatantly just Pokemon rendered out in my art style. I'm already pushing my luck with the fact that I've got some Marvel Rivals inspired designs in this book. But then I remembered that on a YouTube channel I made back in high school called Jude Wolf 16, I had some videos up where I showed off some of the Pokemon sprites that I designed back then by mashing up different Pokemon sprites. And I went back to look at those and I was like, despite the very low quality of these videos, some of these designs are actually really cool. And because I mashed up so many different Pokemon to make them, once I render those out in my modern art style, I figured they'd be legally distinct enough from actual Pokemon that putting them in the book would be totally fine. Is that actually true? I don't know. Maybe I'll get a cease and desist after the book's out for like a week. So make sure to buy it on day one when it is out. But either way, we're doing this, because I think it's going to be a lot of fun to redesign these old sprites. So I'll give a previously on for people that are new to this series, but let's get into the next chapter of the Trismegistus Academy, shall we? Let's go! Hit like if you want.
Subscribe if you feel like it. By the way, enjoy the show.
Previously on the Trismegistus Academy. Alcaya Lamani is a student at the Ludum Academy for Fearsome Fighters. She came to the school willingly at first because headmistress Eloise Ludum agreed to help Alcaya find and defeat the man who killed her sister, Delilah, who was the incredibly kind and benevolent overseer of Alcaya's world. Alcaya doesn't know much about overseers or the multiverse as a whole, but hoped to get information she needed while training to fight at this school in Ludum's dimension and improve her skills with her super speed abilities, which she hasn't been able to measure the full strength of yet as her mind can't keep up to her body. While Alcaya still wants revenge on the person who took her sister away, she has now discovered that Ludum's school, the LAFF, is a horrible place where Ludum will gladly let students die if they can't keep up or follow her rules, and leaving isn't an option. Alcaya has agreed to secretly work with students from their competing school, Tahe, or the Trismegistus Academy for Heroic Enlightenment, to find a way to bring down Ludum and her whole school. Alcaya has only found one other person at her school to team up with in this venture so far, the ever-reluctant Waru Umarek. He's naturally one of the best fighters in the school thanks to a cycling roster of 3 abilities he can swap between, using glowing orbs that he spawns around him. One for flight and speed, one for super strength, and one for energy projection attacks.
All useful.
Unbeknownst to anyone else, Waru has also been reincarnated into this life and has full memory of his past life in which he died at age 25 in an alien invasion. Now he's convinced he's been reincarnated into a young adult novel. After he finally agreed to work with Alcaya, they both caught a glimpse of another student who may also hate the school and want to take it down as well, Katas. She is new to the school, uses a large star blade to fight with, and has some sort of smoky movement or teleportation abilities. Let's see if she wants in on the mission in today's chapter of the Trismegistus Academy.
That could be useful.
Can we seriously just go talk to her already, Lamani? Waru groaned, laying back on his bed with a manga comic across his chest. Alcaya was pacing and thinking. We can't be reckless with this, Waru. If we just go up to her and say, "Hey, Katas, do you hate this place and want to burn it down with us?" and she isn't on board, she could tell Ludum and we're both dead. Okay, but it's been like a week. Didn't you say those Tahe kids have their whole class on board already? We gotta get our roster stacked fast if we want to keep up.
Yeah, you need some help.
Waru grumbled. In the week since going to Tahe and meeting Jake Tajin, Alcaya had mostly just been trying to spy on Katas and get any clear sign she was a good person to bring in on the plan. Katas was surprisingly quiet and would go back to her room immediately after classes. She clearly didn't like the teachers here much, but it was tough to know what exactly she was like, because she disappeared when classes were over. She was an incredible fighter, and Alcaya would have said she could even take on Waru, if it weren't for her limited defensive skills. Alcaya and Waru had both gotten to see her in action against a particularly tough Laughing Little, where she'd fought well, but when put in defense chamber training where projectiles were shot at her in a confined space and she had little room to maneuver, she hadn't fared very well. Alcaya glanced back at Waru.
So you would need to learn how to use the power to just turn into smoke and not move. just smoke, and it goes through her. Then she reappears.
Since when do you actually care about this? Well, for one, I just don't like the idea of those Tahe softies beating us at anything. Plus, I'm kinda curious about this kid too. She's mysterious, which is at least an interesting change from the overtly sinister vibe of the teachers and some of the other kids. Alsaya rolled her eyes.
Now
We
you're
don't have to
thinking-
get more people on board than the Tahe students. This isn't a competition. Well, it being a competition is one of the only ways I'm getting invested, so let's go. I'm sick of waiting. He walked to the door and swung it
come
open.
on.
Alsaya chased after him. What are you doing? He marched to the stairwell and started down it. You know what I'm doing. Waru, stop! We can't! Alsaya grabbed his shoulder, but he spawned his orbs and flicked the red one into his chest, activating his super strength. His muscles grew and he kept marching, unaffected by Alsaya trying to pull it back. They'd previously scoped out where Katas's room was, in the same dorm tower on the west end of the school on the 13th floor. Waru reached her floor and marched up to her door. Alsaya tried to get between him and it, but he just reached over her and knocked. Waru! Alsaya snarled.
Hey, at
Life's
least he's
short,
knocking.
Alsaya, sometimes shorter than you expect. No point waiting around. He knocked again impatiently. She was about to push him back when the door creaked open, just enough for Katas's face to peer through. Surprisingly, it had streaks of dirt splashed across it. Alsaya stopped resisting and knew she at least couldn't let Waru do the talking. There was no way he'd have any semblance of subtlety.
Oh yeah, no, he'd be
Hi,
blunt like a
Katas,
brick.
right? We just wanted to talk to you about something. Do you have a minute? No. She tried to close the door, but Waru stuck his foot in it. Just tell us this and we might leave. Do you hate Ludum as much as Alsaya here? Alsaya was terrified
wow.
by him asking that so bluntly. She could just imagine Ludum hearing it and sending Alsaya out to the Little Lands for a week, if she even lived that long. She wanted to punch Waru in the face, but knew with his strength activated, it had hurt her more than him.
Yeah, like hitting
Thankfully,
a brick
Katas
wall.
opened the door wider and looked Alsaya up and down. She then glanced down the hall for other students. She swung the door open and gestured them both in. Alsaya was relieved, but also surprised to see that Katas was covered in dirt and had a few fresh bruises and cuts across her body. Alsaya was pretty sure she hadn't gotten those in class that day. The blood that dripped from them was also so dark that it nearly looked black instead of red.
Huh.
Katas closed the door quickly and stared at
Does she do a lot of training by herself?
Alsaya. Is this about why you two have been staring at me in classes for the last week? Alsaya wanted to protest, but she knew it was true. Yeah, so do you? Hate Ludum, I mean. Because I'm definitely not a fan either, and we might be coming up with a way to do something about her.
Hopefully that's
A menacing
useful
grin
and true.
crawled across Katas's face. Wonderful. I had planned to tear Eloise Ludum's limbs off myself to cement my legacy and my family lineage. But I suppose having you both along as my aides could be quite helpful. Waru crossed his arms and responded before Alsaya
Useful.
could. Yeah, you're a supporting character at best, kid. We're bringing you onto our team. She looked him up and down. You should learn to respect your elders. But let's not talk here. Come, we can discuss further while we train. She suddenly grabbed a purple stone dial off her desk. She held it out. Place your hands on this. Alsaya looked at the device skeptically. What is it? Katas gave a wry grin. If you're going to work for me, you'll have to trust me.
Well,
Waru
with
snarled.
you, not for
Not
you.
working for you, and I'm older than you, by the way. Katas shook her head. No, you're not, but you are slowing me down. I was in the middle of something, and I'd like to get back to it. She was done waiting. Katas pressed the dial against Waru's chest and snatched Alsaya's wrist. Before either of them could pull away, purple and white smoke burst from the dial and enveloped them all. Before it had cleared, a massive roar bellowed around them. The wind from it rushed past them and pushed the smoke away.
It's like some kind
With
of
it cleared,
training
Alsaya
dial.
saw that they were now in a field surrounded by trees and mountains. Before them, flapping its mighty wings, was some kind of metal and stone dragon beast. Katas shoved the dial in her pocket and skipped forward, pulling her starblade from her back. If anyone comes to my room, we'll be able to hear it, but anything we say within this place is for our ears only.
Oh, that's
we can
useful.
talk freely here with no threat of anyone eavesdropping. Well, as long as you can simultaneously talk and survive the Chimera capital.
Chimera Capital. Now that is an interesting name, and I like it. Sounds like something you would hear in a fantasy novel. But most likely a place that did a lot of experiments, making chimeras.
The monster opened a stone mouth on the end of its arm, and a ball of energy started building in it. Alcaya quickly tapped each foot on the ground twice to activate her speed. A beam of green, bubbling light exploded from the mouth right towards Katas. Before it struck, she vanished in a swell of white smoke, and 3 streaks of it shot in different directions away from the blast. It struck and sent dirt and stone exploding all around Alcaya and Waru. Alcaya stumbled back from the blast, but Waru, with his strength still active, just looked up impressed. Alright, you've got my attention, kid, but where are we? One of the smoke streaks shot up towards the creature, and Katas emerged from it. She ran up the side of the monster. The tentacles springing from its left side stretched out to grab her, but she slashed her star blade ahead of her and chopped them off before leaping through the rest. She hurled her blade at its wing and struck dead on, but the weapon just bounced off the metallic flesh with a loud clang. She landed on the Chimera's shoulder, and her weapon teleported back into her hand in another burst of smoke. She was about to slash it at the beast's eye, but its tail swung up over its head and smacked her off it.
She
landed gracefully on the ground and spun her weapon in her hand. My family calls this place the Chimera Capital. It's a portable pocket dimension my grandfather created for my grandmother, so she could train against fierce monsters whenever she wanted. When someone transports themselves in here, a chimera will automatically be created by pulling random combinations of energy structures from creatures across the multiverse. Oh, and because I didn't change the settings, as I said, it makes a chimera for each person who enters. The ground suddenly quaked from a stomp. Alcaya and Waru whipped around to see a titanic green creature with a head like a shelled sea beast coming into form. In the air above it was a smaller, armored purple and blue dragon with flames bursting from around its neck like a mane.
This one.
Waru rolled his shoulders, cracking them. Okay, I can dig it. Which one you want, Lamani? Still tired from classes, Alcaya groaned. Is neither an option? Before either of them had time to pick, the purple and blue dragon soared down towards Alcaya, breathing a beam of flames at her. She sprinted out of the way and started getting used to the texture of this field. She was at least happy to find she had pretty good footing here, and there weren't many bumps that could trip her up. As she dodged and evaded the coming flames, she called. If we just teleported into a pocket dimension, doesn't that mean Ludum is going to know we left? One of the Tahe kids told me Ludum can tell when someone leaves her dimension. Katas was now latched onto her chimera's tail.
That would be the thing, though. You didn't leave her dimension. You're in a dimension inside her dimension.
And it was trying to smack her into the ground, but she kept scrambling around it to evade being crushed. She was slashing her blade at the gaps in its armored plating, and starting to get some good cuts in. Yes, all overseers can tell when someone comes or goes from their dimension, but this is a special portable pocket dimension. Whichever dimension the device is in when used, it temporarily becomes part of that dimension. My grandfather programmed it in that way deliberately, so that if he and my grandmother were in another dimension, and she wanted to use it, they wouldn't draw that realm's overseer to them. They are not always in other realms with permission of that realm's overseer. And don't worry, my grandfather is one of the few good overseers. As hard as that can be to believe, knowing what wretches they can be. Hey, watch it! My sister was an overseer, and one of the best people I ever knew. Alcaya's pursuing dragon chimera got close, and she sprang off the ground to let it soar under her. The flames from its back got far too close to cooking her, but she still managed to catch one of its wings. She booted both feet into it to bend the limb the wrong way. The beast shrieked and spun out, crashing into the dirt. Alcaya landed and rolled, grabbing a clump of dirt, sprinting around the beast and hurling that into its eyes. She hadn't been excited to do more training after everything their teachers put them through in classes, but Alcaya was actually starting to enjoy this. Something about fighting these monsters felt much more exciting than the grim terror of Ludum's creations. Katas leapt off her chimera's tail as its arms swung around to grab her. She hurled her weapon high above its head as she fell. Before she hit the ground, she teleported in a burst of smoke up to her weapon, then whistled above the creature. It whipped its head up and roared just as she hurled her starblade towards it. It carved right through the beast's mouth, chopping part of its tongue off. She landed on its back and slid down its tail like a slide before leaping off it to the ground and summoning her weapon back to her again. I did not mean to offend, but surely you know how awful most overseers are. Or, at least were. I'm not saying I approve of the mass slaughtering of them that occurred, but there are many more overseers like Eloise Ludum, and not many like my grandfather, and your sister, if she was as benevolent as you claim. She was, and whoever killed her is gonna pay for it. Alcaya responded angrily, but more than that, she was feeling sadness swell up.
We also have a little bit of a fanfic.
along with confusion. Were most overseers really more like Ludum than like Delilah? It wasn't something she really wanted to think about as she continued to brawl with her beast.
Not bad. Looks like it was a combination of Aerodactyl, Dragonite, Typhlosion, and both Nidoking and Nidoqueen.
Quick interruption, not for the usual sort of ad for my posters on my Teespring store, or my book of Vigilance, or my art book Monsters of the Multiverse, all linked in the description.
All still awesome.
Kind of just become an ad for those. But more importantly, an update for the book version of Mytholethal, a mythology, action, comedy, adventure storyline I put out last year that I'm currently in the editing process for. The reason that it's taking a bit longer is mainly because I'm adding some additional artwork to it. I figure people that buy the book version should get some exclusive art. And there was some stuff that I just really wanted to add. I will be making a video in the next couple weeks where I design some of the gods in that storyline that I didn't redesign in the first place, like the human version of Quetzalcoatl and Zeus #1. And when I make that video, I'll finally officially announce the release date for the book, but know that it is still coming, and I'm very excited to put it out. Anyway, this felt like a fitting story to give that update during. Let's get back into the tale, shall we? Let's go.
Meanwhile, a stretchy vine-like clawed arm with...
Looks like this one is a combination of Regigigas, Tropius, this Ammonite, and Cradley, and maybe Magilna? I'm not sure.
Was trying to snatch Waru, who had switched to his flight powers and was darting around his chimera. Its other arm, with an extra toothy mouth on it, swung up behind him, but he swooped over and around it, flying up higher into the air. A beam of mud burst from its mouth towards him. He dodged it, but the creature turned fast, sending the beam right into his path, and he was smacked backwards, covered in grime. He spun through the air and recovered, shaking some of the mud off. Oh, seriously? This place better have a shower in it. He flew down to the ground, then straight towards his beast at full speed. Been wanting to try this. He got enough momentum, got close, then flicked out his flight orb and instantly called in his strength. He flung right into the beast's chest and hammered it with all his might. A shockwave sent dirt flying around them and even knocked a fair amount of the mud off Waru as the beast was hurled backwards.
That's how you do it.
Good. Glad you're on the team now, kid,
Good
because
job.
fighting these things is more fun than fighting the laughing littles.
Oh,
Is this where you always
honestly,
come after
yeah.
class? Katas landed down near Waru, readying up for another attack. First, stop calling me kid. I age slowly, so I'm actually 36 years old.
Go!
Waru turned his head to her, somewhat excitedly,
I
but
expected that.
hiding it. Seriously? She nodded. Yes, my grandfather is ageless as an overseer, and my grandmother is a nearly immortal being called a god queller. She is one of only 5 in all existence.
Wait! Please tell me. Is this who I think it is? Oh, please!
Along with my great-aunt, my father, and his 2 sisters. My cousins and I inherited some aspects of their god queller abilities, but they have been diluted. So instead of being immortal, we simply age at around 1/3 of the rate of a normal human. Meaning I will have much less of a life than my elders have had to cement my legacy. Killing a scourge to the multiverse such as Eloise Ludum would be an act remembered for centuries to come. Waru's beast had gotten up and was charging towards them.
I am so glad I paused because y'all would have had no respect for me after hearing me know it out like that. Because this is the granddaughter of Ortis and Mythal.
Katas's was flying in even faster from the other side. They both nodded at each other, waited till both were as close as possible, then leapt out of the way. The steel dragon crashed into the green titan, and they both fell back to the ground intertwined. Katas suddenly grabbed Waru's shirt. But neither of you may ever breathe a word of this to anyone. I have come here under a false name and age specifically because Ludum is surely aware of my family. My grandparents have not been around quite as long as her, but she would have recognized my lineage if I'd come here under my own name. Alcaya was listening, but had just found that the underside of her creature's neck was a weak point. She pelted it with rapid-fire punches, leaving it winded and choking, while she doused the flames on its neck with more dirt and some of the residual mud from Waru's beast. That seemed to be weakening it even further. She darted away from it, then sprinted right back at it, leapt at it, and double-kicked it in the head, knocking it onto its side. With it dazed, she ran over to Waru and Katas. Okay, well, what is your real name then? She stuck her blade into the ground and put her hands to her hips as she said, While you must continue to call me Katas for now, In truth, I am Tale Finimo, a name that the whole
Yes.
multiverse will know as the woman who slayed Eloise Ludum. If either of you feel the need to be the one to lay the final blow on her, then speak up now, because that will terminate our partnership. Waru and Alsaya looked at each other. Waru shrugged. I kinda wanted to do it, but if you're that needy for a legacy, then whatever. Mainly, I just want to see the look on her face when Ludum realizes her own students have got her beat. Alsaya nodded. Yeah, I just want to get out of her who killed my sister, but besides that, you can be the one to take her out. I doubt the Tahe kids will care either. So, I guess, welcome to the mission,
Maybe.
Katas. They all continued to fight their chimeras as Alsaya explained to Katas how the kids from the Trismegistus Academy were helping them devise the plan to take down Ludum. Alsaya also told her about the watch Jake had given her to communicate with them. Katas said she didn't want the Tahe kids to know about her real name and her...
See, reason why I wasn't 100% sure about that at first is because there's the whole tone. It's a lot like Mythil's sister, who I am having trouble remember. But then I remember she said her grandfather is the overseer of her realm. And who else would it be? Yeah, that could be the overseer of a realm and married to a god queller. Ortis!
her family. She could keep a close eye on Alsaya and Waru, but letting a group of kids she didn't know in another dimension have that information was another story. Plus, she was pretty sure some of her family, or at least close family friends, knew headmistress Evangeline Trismegistus. Tale hadn't told her family what she was up to, and given how famously dangerous Ludum was, they may try to come and stop her if they found out. Alsaya also asked Katas if she knew who killed the majority of the multiverse's overseers. Katas didn't know, but that did lead her to tell Alsaya much more about her intriguing family history. Her grandparents and parents had been around for thousands of years, but in that time had lived many different lives. After living for such a long time, they'd eventually found their lives could get a bit boring and repetitive. So, every few centuries, they'd move to another dimension, usually one with many problems, and take on new names and lives there. They'd save people from the threats that existed there, make some new friends, sometimes even embrace different personalities for themselves, then eventually go back to their dimension for a while to make sure it was all right and resume their old lives.
Okay.
As long as their home universe was doing fine, they'd eventually go off and live another new life adventure.
That's not bad.
It was a way to keep such a long
fun.
life feeling fresh. Basically, they were doing live-action role-playing in a more live-action way than is usually meant by the term.
Oh, yeah.
Katas's
Every
father's
100
name was
years.
Allegor. He and his two sisters had decided to stop having children centuries earlier because they'd learned that their immortality, stemming from something called the God Queller bloodline, didn't continue on to their children as they thought it would. This meant any kids they had would age and die over the course of 300 years or so. It was too painful to watch their children age and die while they lived on, so they stopped doing it. Until recently. Allegor and his sisters each found love in their new temporary home dimension and decided to have children. Even if they did age and die while their parents lived on, at least the kids could live a good few centuries with their cousins as close friends.
That's pretty
Katas
nice.
had come to terms with the fact that she'd die someday and wasn't even interested in becoming immortal. But she did want to cement her legacy, and would do whatever she had to achieve that.
Just like her grandmother.
All three students eventually finished off their chimeras and spent a bit more time getting to know each other before going back to Alsaya's room to get the watch and update Jake and the others on their new ally. Jake's class had just finished their first day of something called Resilience Combat Training, and they were all exhausted, but excited to hear about a new member joining their mission. They also all agreed that it was finally time to devise an actual plan. Their schools would be competing in a combat tournament in a little under 3 months. That would finally bring them all into the same place, with Ludum there as well. Having two groups of heroes all in one place who wanted Ludum taken down could be the perfect time to strike. That is, if they were ready by then.
Yeah.
The Tahe kids were still debating
Gonna
bringing
take
their
some
plan
time.
to the teachers, but Jake was also starting to think that if friends and family could come to the competition day, he, Anna, and Niseko could bring a pretty stacked roster of heroes to be ready to attack Ludum and her faculty.
Oh, 100%.
All the Tahe kids were also fine with Katas landing the final blow on Ludum. Katas got increasingly excited about the help she'd have in achieving her goal, and all the while had no idea that the Tahe students were actually well aware of the legacy of her grandparents. At their campfires, a student from her grandparents' home world, Parvul Markopolis, was regaling them with the legendary tale of how Mythil and Ortis Finimo met and saved their world from the treacherous former god overseer, Tarsa.
I was right!
Tale wasn't aware that they knew this story, but she herself knew it well, and it was one that she wanted to rival with her own feats of heroism.
Katas, you can put your mind to it, and you can rival your grandmother. Well, maybe you only have 300 years, but you can still do so much in that time.
If you enjoyed this episode, I recommend going back to the beginning of the Trismegistus Academy storyline. It was a little bit lighter on the art early on, but I am kind of ramping up the amount of art in this series now, and I think ultimately that's going to make the book better, even if it does end up being just a limited release. Right now I'm kind of merging 3 different eras of the channel together. I've still got my ongoing storylines going, which I'm going to be turning into books, but even in those I'm working in a bit more of the pop culture crossover format. Then I also recently brought back Illustrator Reacts in a way that I'm really enjoying.
That's
and
right.
then I am just doing a classic pop culture crossover kind of episode, like my Fantastic Four Dragons video I did recently.
Yeah, that was
I
a
think
pretty good
Monday's
one.
video is going to be more in that sort of vein. But besides that, that's all for today, except of course for ending this video on some kind of positive or inspiring note. And the thought I want to leave people with is an idea that I've heard from Alan Watts, who said that you shouldn't take life seriously, but you should take life sincerely. Which may sound pretty similar, but seriously has more of that energy of, oh, we gotta take this really seriously, what's happening
Like
here.
rough
And he's
and
not in
tough.
favor of the opposite direction, where you become apathetic towards life and just think, oh, whatever, who cares, nothing matters. But
Overly
taking life
soft.
sincerely is more about seeing life as important without getting so serious about it. Being completely invested and enthralled in it while
To be,
enjoying
though.
the process. And also accepting whatever may come. It's hard to make out the distinction between the two, but I hope that clicked with
Oh, I
someone
completely
out there. I love
understood.
you all, and I'll see you all in the next episode on Monday. Goodbye.
Alright everyone, well that's going to be the end of today's video, and I hope you all enjoyed this. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe for more. Link to the original will be in the description below, and I'll see all of y'all next time when we flick it back on. Until then, this is Fox, signing out. Peace.